and that's India. And so what they've really said is that in order to get some sort of a treaty through, they're going to have to exempt the people who are now the major contributors to the CO2 in the atmosphere. That's how dotty it has all become. But the reason why they're pushing for this, desperately pushing for this treaty, is they now know the science has collapsed. Our paper, among others, tells them it's collapsed. But they can't admit it, and their only way of not being shown up as having got it as badly wrong as they did is actually to bring CO2 concentration down to zero, so that when, as they now know it would anyway, the temperature fails to rise, they can say they did that with their heroic cuts in CO2 rather than it wasn't going to happen anyway. But of course, this paper has provoked outrage and screaming fury on the left. At first, they tried to poo-poo it, saying that the journal it was insignificant. Then they discovered it is the Journal of the Chinese Academy of Sciences, the largest such thing in the world. Then they tried various very dopey attacks on the science, which fell completely flat because most of them had plainly not even read the paper. So then, when all that had failed, they decided to attack Dr. Willie Soon, who is my very distinguished co-author of this paper, who's been an astrophysicist at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics for the last 25 years. And they had the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Boston Globe, all the left-wing mainstream media wrote lying pieces saying that he had a conflict of interest in that he should have declared he was funded by fossil fuel interests when writing our paper. Well, he has, as many scientists have had, funding both from governments and from fossil fuel interests in the past. However, at present, at the time he worked on our paper, he wasn't being funded by anyone.
But let me just interrupt you for a moment, please, because I follow this, and we always defend ourselves. I've never gotten any fossil fuel company money, but I also follow the news for 23 years, 20 years on air. Most of the big oil companies, like Dutch Royal Shell and BP, are some of the biggest funders of climate change baloney. ExxonMobil, 8 years ago, Rex Tillerson was put on notice, it was in the news, that he would get behind it by David Rockefeller or be removed at the board meeting because David came and exercised the fact that he was the majority owner of it since it was busted up with the Sherman Antitrust Act in 1906. And so that raised its ugly head, the robber baron money, and the fact that, in fact, there's the headline, fossil fuel industry caught taking a page out of the tobacco playbook. So they're spinning it that it's the fossil fuel companies doing this when you could go into any university and find a department where something's going to be funded by one of these industries and then supposedly discredits it. The truth is, you look at the Hide the Decline people and you look at ClimateGate and you look at Pachari and all these players and Al Gore owning one of the climate exchanges and Obama invested in the Chicago exchange. I mean, it's a total joke. They are the most conflicted group of anybody, and I'm just sick of the red herring. That's all they've got is all scientists agree with us. And when you show that most don't, they go, well, you're all paid off by oil companies. It's just insane.
I mean, it is completely outrageous. Something like, I think it's 5,000 times as much funding goes to true believers in Thermageddon, this new religion, than to those of us who are skeptical. I mean, nothing comes to me at all. I very occasionally get a speaker fee here and there, but nobody pays me to do my research into the climate. I'm always being asked that. The left are always trying to catch me out saying, who's paying you?
Well, why are they allowed to be paid, but then you aren't?
I think it's because governments have decided for various reasons of extending their own power and reach and getting more taxation and regulatory power that they want to back this story whether it's true or not. I've had this from several members of the Conservative Party in Britain, which is the ruling party here. They know perfectly well it's rubbish, but they also find it very convenient as a way of keeping the taxpayer in his place. So there's a large element of sort of totalitarian suppression of freedom and transfer of wealth from the little guy to the big
Sure,
guy.
it's a giant power grab, but, I mean, isn't this good that they're forced to look at your paper? Doesn't this show you're having a big effect, that they're trying to discredit it?
I think the fact is they are furious because what I've done is I've said, look, you can have a simple climate model, so simple you can run it on a pocket calculator, and that model shows we're not going to get all that much warming. Now, what worries them about that is that if I'm proven to be right, then a lot of very searching questions are going to be asked in 30 or 40 years' time about why so many trillions were spent on the basis of these huge climate models that simply got it wrong. And if you want to see this paper for yourself, because it's a Lulu, there's a lot of very good material in it. As you can see, it's flashing on the screen now. You can go to scibull.com, scibull.com, rather an unfortunate moniker for their website. And then just click on most read articles, and we are #1 on the list. And please do that, because the more people download this paper, the more the left will take note that no longer are we sitting back and just letting them control the journals. We are getting in too. Of course, the left have been furious at the Science Bulletin for running this. There's been a lot of complaints about Willie Soon having not declared his conflict of interest, but I wrote to the editors and said, look, this has arisen, and here is the answer. None of us was paid a single cent to do months of work. You know, a scientific paper is not an easy thing to do. It takes a lot of work to put it together. We were not paid a single cent by anyone to do that. So the editor very kindly accepted that and has been sending my letter out to all the complainers saying, well, look, actually there isn't any money that changed hands here, and it's a perfectly good, straightforward paper, so why don't you read it? Well,
that's just like when Brian Williams gets discredited, they change the subject to Bill O'Reilly, and I'm not defending Bill O'Reilly. He's even promoted this nonsense. The point is they want to change the subject by demonizing somebody to get the attention off of them, when the fact that the ice sheets are getting bigger and that it's so cold, people know this is bull. Then they learn that
there's been no global warming for 18 years, according to the RSS satellite data set. No warming for about a decade on any data set. And that's certainly not what they predicted. We've had sea level hardly changing at all, according to the Envisat satellite in the 8 years it operated. The GRACE satellites, which are the gravitational recovery satellites, probably now the most accurate way of measuring sea level, actually showed it falling between 2003 and 2009.
Sure. It's a giant power grab, and you're the champion of exposing it, and we'll continue to get updates from you. scienceandpublicpolicy.org. You can go there and link through and find the paper. Get it out to everybody you know and get in their face. It's all a big power grab by George Soros and others to literally tax everything humans do. Lord Monkton, Godspeed.
Many thanks.
God bless. Brought to you by Infidel Body Armor.